Welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with your host, Emmett Muckles. Please visit iTunes, Stitcher, or emmettmuckles.com to listen to all the episodes for free.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast with Emmett Muckles. Today is a day that the Lord has given you, so rejoice in this moment and be glad. Yesterday is gone. Tomorrow is not here. It is time for you to perform your human magic, which means predict the future. How can you do that? Through imagination. What you can think, you can make happen. Think about it. You said, I want to go to college. I want to be a doctor. And you became a doctor. What did you do? You predicted the future. That's just a little example. But today, let's get down to the brass taxes. Today, my guest is Monica Tanner. Now, if you really want to figure out, especially in this time period of COVID, and you're stuck there with your significant other and they're getting on your damn nerves, and you're like, I'm going to have to work on this after. She's figured out how to get it back in point in 30 days or less. How are you today?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. I told you I got my skills down, didn't I?
I love it.
So, you know, you're coaching people. Your business is growing, and you can also find her on the brightersideoflife.com. How did you get to now? I mean, what brought you to the point where you said, look, I have the wherewithal, or I figured out this methodology to help people?
You know, I'll start way back when I was 12 years old. My parents got a divorce.
That was like 10 years ago.
Thank you. That's sweet. That was, a little over 30 years ago.
Right.
But my parents got a divorce, and obviously that changed the whole course of my life. So
right.
as a pretentious little 12-year-old, I used to go around studying married couples and trying to figure out what kept them together. And so I, grew up, went to college, graduated with a degree in sociology and child development, thinking that I wanted to get my master's of social work so I could continue to work with families and couples. And guess what? I met my Prince Charming right as I was starting that program, and he was still in college in another state. So I ditched that program, got married, followed the love of my life. We started our family. 4 kids later, the youngest went to school, and I decided again to try graduate school, this time in marriage and family counseling, because I really, really wanted to help couples. And I got 3 semesters into a marriage and family counseling graduate program and decided it was absolutely not the direction I wanted to go in. I knew I wanted to help couples, but I would literally come home crying every day. I was like, I don't want to do counseling with couples.
Wait a minute. I don't understand. Why? What changed?
I knew I wanted to help couples, but counseling just felt like a really, really laborious way to do it. I could only help couples one-on-one. And then I decided, well, I'll take a group counseling course and figure out how to help lots of couples at once.
Right.
And I hated it. I didn't like the theories I was learning. I didn't like the structure of it. I was like, I need to get my help out to the masses. I wanted to help lots and lots and lots of couples, and I wanted to be more preventative. I found after interviewing lots of couples as part of one of my courses, that the success rate is actually low. And that you fill up your schedule and that's it. Like, you're at max capacity. And therapists really aren't supposed to get on social media. They're not supposed to be out in the open. They're not supposed to use a lot of their own experiences to teach. And that's what I wanted to do. I felt like I had experiences growing up. I felt like I'd been married for almost 20 years, and I wanted to use all that to help couples not get to the breaking point. And I felt like in therapy, it was like couples who were at the breaking point who, sometimes were beyond help. And so I wanted to, here's how I explain it. I wanted to do oil changes, not work with blown engines.
But sometimes, what occurs is there's a fault in the engine before the car is put together.
Interesting thought. Yes.
The reason I say this is because I am not a young man, but I can reflect on a young man's ideologies. And I've come up with this theory, particularly for men. Most of us get into our relationships because of lust.
Okay.
So we have a deteriorating foundation because as we age, those things that attract you because of lust are not substantial. And so as you move through that journey, when the things of substance supposed to kick in, you haven't made that foundation. Hence, you had a crack in the engine before it rolled off the assembly line.
All right. Well, beautiful analogy and a great lead-in to my programs and what I teach, because most couples start out very attracted to each other.
Yes.
Obviously, right? Enough so that they're going to walk down the aisle. They're going to say, I do. Typically, at that moment, they have these grand desires. They know that they're going to face life together. They feel like they've married their best friend. They're on the same team. They've got it. The image I use is two knuckles, right? Where you can see their wedding rings. They're like, here we go, right? We've got this. We're taking on life together.
Got it.
And what happens is generally you've got careers, you've got kids, you've got all kinds of adult responsibilities, mortgages and car payments and all of these things that come up. And I'd like to talk about the properties of a magnet, right? Magnets are attracted to each other. Opposite poles attract.
Yes.
We're typically attracted to our opposites. And when we get married, there's a lot of magnetism. There's a lot of attractions and things are going great until you bump into all of the junk that happens in life, which it doesn't change the properties of the magnets. It just puts a lot of junk in the middle of it so that they no longer can connect. So typically in the timeline of a typical marriage, you have extreme attraction and then you have a lot of junk that gets in the way. So these magnets are still attracted to each other. The internal properties of the magnets have not changed. My job is to come in and clear out the gunk so that they can find each other again. And that's typically how it goes. And like I said in therapy, you're usually not getting them until there's a lot of hurts and a lot of stuff in between the magnets. And I like to catch it when there's just stuff in between the magnets, but these magnets the poles are still strong and they're still going for each other. There's just some stuff in between that we've got to clear out. And typically when you teach a couple the right tools, strategies, and frameworks, they can overcome most any challenge.
So what's the basic framework that you would have a couple rely on, or anyone should rely on for that fact, to maintain a relationship? And the reason I bring this up is because we are such a superficial reality in this day and time. Everything is Instagram and likes and
right.
Kardashians.
That's the big one that gets in the gunk in the middle, right?
Yeah, and I know this particularly. Women have been judged as value as based on looks for so long, or I hate to say it, but I'm blunt like this, or breeding capabilities. Mm-hmm. People don't realize, the women's suffrage movement of the 1920s, what that brought along. And a lot of times, especially in this day and age, and these young folks don't really get it, is that was for white women. So you got a lot of other women who have some issues, leading up to the 60s. But the 70s brought in an empowerment for women, which also changed the dynamic of relationships. So do you see that this is a new day and you have to have a new approach with these foundations that I was asking you about?
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I'll give you a little bit of history kind of based on your comments today. When I started out, my whole kind of purpose, I felt like, was to teach people how to have mind-blowing sex. Because I was like, here's the problem with couples.
Let's get into that later.
Well, how long is this interview? Okay. So I originally started, I was like, I've got to teach couples how to have mind-blowing sex because it's such an important dynamic of a relationship. And it so often is where a lot of problems start. See, closely attached couples, securely attached couples, think of their sex life as just one of the many facets that they connect and come together. Whereas couples who are struggling tend to blame sex more often than not. And it's because it's just a good illustration that the connection is breaking down. So I started off and I was like, I'm just going to teach couples how to have mind-blowing sex. And I started and I was working with couples and it wasn't working. I'm like, why isn't this working? I have all of these tools. I have all of these strategies. I should be able to help these people have mind-blowing sex. But here's the thing. If the sex isn't good, if the connection isn't there, then there's no such thing as mind-blowing sex. Maybe once or twice, but not sustainable mind-blowing sex.
Is that a gender specific thing?
It's a little bit gender specific because men are more spontaneous in their desire types. They don't need all the emotional connection most of the time, but it does enrich the experience. I mean, you're a happily married man. Is that right?
Oh yeah. I got a hottie.
Right. So doesn't your emotional connection add to the experience of your sexual intimacy?
That's weird for me to say at this space. I know it is for her, and I have a great deal of female friends, and for them it is really important. But it's a different entity for guys.
It's true, but let me ask you this. If your wife was not enjoying sex at all, she was just like, we're married, I got to have sex with this guy, would that create a good...
Yeah, but that's a different that's a different question.
Is it?
And I'll say it like this, because you know it happens. Young guys tend to be very promiscuous.
Okay.
They will go and have one night stand, and it's not a big thing. See what I'm saying? So
yeah, but how fulfilling and sustainable is that? At some point you burn out and you're like, I want something a little bit more than this. You take me back. Most men do.
You're taking me back to like when I was 23. I said, I'm going to die if I keep doing this.
Right? Maybe just for your physical health.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think it's just a different perspectives on, and I don't mean to go down this rabbit hole with you. I'm just seeing it. I just understand that there's different perspectives from some masculine points of view and some feminine points of view, because, there's a diaspora. There are people who are in the gray area and you're just like, what are you? Sure. But I do understand how sex is really important when it comes to a relationship, because ultimately you're just buddies. I mean, that is the foundation we base everything on sex. Because if that's the case, then me and my buddy, James from high school, we could have got married. You know what I'm saying? Because we base everything on the interconnection physically between people as far as relationships concerned. But as you were saying, that there's more to it, because you were finding out the sex can be great, but there's more components. Hence, like I was saying, we based ours on lust when we're young men, and there's so much more to it. So how did you make that shift?
Yeah. So what I noticed is that it just wasn't working, that I could teach them all these techniques and tactics and strategies and tools and whatever. But if the connection wasn't there, then it wasn't mind-blowing sex. So I backed up. And now all of my frameworks are based on complete connection and intimacy. So for me, what I've found in my experience is that connection comes first, and that sex is the highest expression of that feeling of connection and vulnerability and opening up and being able to share that extremely personal part of yourself. And what makes sex mind blowing is that feeling of safety. So good sex is created by desire, which is typically not created by the same emotions and feelings as love. So what makes sex mind blowing is when you can combine the aspects of love and desire and feel totally comforted and secure to be able to be adventurous and fiery in your sexual experience. Does that make sense? So you're combining two very different mindsets, but I found that you need a little bit of both to make the sex mind blowing.
I concur with that because people have their own way and they're not comfortable, which may be a little bit different than what people think. And for you to be able to express that, you have to have a level of intimacy, which means comfort, which means trust within that.
Those things. Yes.
So that you can actually have a fulfilling journey. That's the best way to say it, because it's not like a thing. It's a journey through. This is my second marriage. I was married for 20 some odd years. Anyway, but I understand what you're saying.
It is a journey. It's an experience, right? It's an experience and an expression of something much deeper.
You know Tori Tolbert.
Yes, I do. I've been on her podcast.
That's my buddy.
Yeah, she was great. We had a great interview all about sex.
Right.
How to have sex as a busy couple, which is also very different. You have to change your mindset there. If you're a busy couple, it means you've got to change the idea that sex is just something on your to-do list and use it to be fulfilling and sustaining, because it is.
Now, you say you can get this on track in 30 days.
My programs are 90. My programs are actually 100 they're 3 months.
That makes sense because,
4 months. They're 120 days actually. But I do, you're basing that off of my marriage summit, which is 30 days, right?
Yes.
I did do interviews with over 30 of like the top marriage experts. The precept of that, like what I gave them was, you've got to save your marriage in 30 days. What do you do? Gotcha. So that was like the first kind of thing that I did in this space where I was putting out a lot of information for people. Because I was like, you've got 30 days to save your marriage. What do you do?
Have you seen there's a different perspective of the masculine versus the feminine? Here's why I say the masculine versus the feminine, because we are no longer in a strictly binary world, because now you have the presentation of a female, but with a masculine mindset and vice versa. So do you see that there's a different approach based on that concept?
Absolutely. So what I think you're referring to is different desire types. We have a spontaneous desire type, which is typically more male, and a responsive desire type, which is typically more female, but you can definitely have the crossover. Okay. So a spontaneous desire type is where you're just walking around thinking about sex all the time. It's spontaneous, right?
Right.
Where responsive is more, you kind of have to set the mood. You kind of have to make it something that's, in front of you, right? Like, I'm not just doing an Excel spreadsheet and thinking about sex. You have to kind of come and set the mood for me, right?
Right.
So that's the difference between spontaneous and responsive. But what you have here is when you're talking with couples and you typically have one spontaneous and one responsive, that you start to get like frustrated with the difference, right? The spontaneous is like, why can't you be more spontaneous? And the response is like, why can't you like back off and be a little more responsive, right?
Yeah.
But what I teach couples is that both are so important. Can you imagine if everyone was walking around with a spontaneous desire type? Like nothing would ever get accomplished. We'd just all be having sex all the time.
I'm going to get in trouble for what I'm about to say, but that sounds like all my gay male friends.
Oh, sure. Or it sounds like a perfectly male dominated society
Yes.
would be amazing, right? Now, if everybody was walking around with a responsive desire type, the human race would probably cease to exist, right? Nothing would ever happen.
Yeah.
So you have to have the interplay of both. And when couples learn to appreciate both desire types and recognize that neither is better than the other, you just need both to create balance.
Right.
Then you stop fighting against the other and you go, okay, I see why your desire type is important. And I see why your desire type is important. And let's just work as a team now. We've got different strengths and let's just play to our strengths.
So I'm going to ask you how you envision, because this dynamic has changed. And what I mean by dynamic, what we're going through at the current moment, it has changed a lot of things. So one of the things that I said to my wife, because she's a doula, I said, in about 9 months, 10 months, you're going to be really busy.
Yeah.
If I were a divorce lawyer in about 9-10 months, or when this is done, I'm going to be really busy.
I do fear that, yes.
With this, have you seen an influx of relationship counseling based on the fact that now you have to spend time together?
Right. And the many of our normal escapes have been taken away. So the ability to go to work, the ability to take your kids to activities, enjoying sports together, going on vacations even. Yes, all of those things have been taken away now, which leaves, us very vulnerable to all of the fissures and the little, idiosyncrasies and things that we typically had a lot of avoidance techniques for. They're all like right there. Magnified by like 1,000, right? You're seeing every little annoying thing that your spouse does. You're now in each other's space. You're learning how to work in a whole new way, right? I mean, my husband comes in and he's like, "What do you do all day?" where before I could just like give him the rundown, and now he's like, "But I'm watching you now," and so you're having different difficult conversations. And that really requires the use now of better tools and systems to be able to overcome all of the problems. You can't just like book a trip to Hawaii anymore. You can't go to Hawaii right now. No.
Yeah, I found that out because I was asked to go, or someone requested that I come there. I was like,
We've rebooked our Hawaii trip twice now. It's very frustrating. And those types of things are frustrating as well. Like those types of things where my husband's trying to get deposits back and things like that. Those types of things are happening way more frequently. There's a lot more stress put on a family. You've got furloughs and layoffs and people are worried about the economy. And those types of stress also take their toll on a relationship.
Now, we talked about the fact that sex is a major component in the relationship. Let's talk about finances, because there's 3 things that cause typical demise in relationships from my point of view, which is sex, money, and children or family, because, we live in this nuclear age. But the finances part, how often do you see that, the sex is good? Like, yeah, we got that down. But this guy can't budget, or she just spends too much money, or so forth and so on.
Yeah. So in my world, all of that comes back to sex. So I'll tell you that struggles with money, struggles with kids. If you can get together and express your love for each other through, it doesn't have to be like penis and vagina sex, like intimacy, sexual closeness, right? Then those things can be alleviated because there's a portion of intimacy that alleviates the stress and pain and resistance that come from finances, from kids, from everything else. If you know how to comfort and love and sustain and support each other in that sexually intimate way, then typically couples can overcome all the other stuff.
So are there approaches?
Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, but
are there approaches for women to men versus men to women? Are there strategies that each one needs to learn for the other?
Yeah. So definitely there's a different way that that a man would approach it versus a woman typically. But so the frameworks, like in the things that I teach, it's a lot of emotional regulation, like learning how to process and regulate your emotions, which looks different for many women versus many men,
Gotcha.
right? But what I teach you is a very personal approach. So my 5-step framework, which you asked about earlier, is processing emotions, communication, friendship, reigniting romance, and then sexual intimacy. So when I'm teaching you how to process and regulate emotions, I'm teaching on a very personal level. So that's going to vary amongst women and amongst men. It's going to be like a kind of a stronger response if you're talking to a woman about regulating their emotions versus a man. But I'm teaching the same principles. You're just taking them and applying them differently depending on kind of your brain.
Got you. I see that you have a lot of women on your podcast, and your podcast is On the Brighter Side, correct?
Sure.
Where's the dudes?
There's tons of dudes on my podcast.
I'm just looking at your latest episode. So ladies and gentlemen, please go to onthebrightersideoflife.com. Here you can find all of her information. Now, with this scenario that's happening, where do you see yourself? Just go with me on this. Remember I said like imagination. 18 months from now, where do you see yourself being in your practice?
I would love, love, love to be helping more couples find complete connection and intimacy. That is my passion. All the other stuff I'm ready to hand off to somebody, right? but the actual coaching my clients is what fills my cup and lights me up. I love to see couples make breakthroughs. And it's so funny because I kind of do go back and forth. Right now, my program is filled with dudes. I have lots of dudes in my program right now. But in the past I've had women and on my podcast, you're right. I'm about to do a whole like series on women's sexual health. So there's going to be a lot of women on my podcast, but dudes are attracted to me, right? Cause I'm teaching them how to have mind blowing sex ultimately. And that's dudes like that, right?
Yes. I mean, if you've seen Game of Thrones, of course.
Yeah. Right. So I'm giving you like tangible tools and strategies to make your sex life heated, like special, like important. And so I do attract more dudes initially, but when women start to see like, oh, I see how the things that I teach you are tools for life. It's not just having great sex. It's like how to show up in your marriage, how to show up in your life, how to show up in your job, how to show up at school, whatever it is. I'm teaching you these tools and principles that are going to change the way you experience any circumstance. So I have 3 laws. You want me to share my laws with you?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the 3 laws that complete intimacy are based on are 1, the only thing you have 100% control over is yourself. You can't control the economy. You can't control the weather. You can't control your kids or your spouse or anything. You only can control yourself.
True.
So when you learn how to focus on your locus of control, it grows your circle of influence. But the more you focus on outside factors that you really can't control, that a lot of people spend a lot of time trying to control, absolutely, it shrinks that area of influence. Okay. So that's the first law. The second law, and this is a tough one for people, I get a lot of pushback on it, but it's Viktor Frankl and it's beautiful, that you have at any given point, you have 100% control over how you experience any given circumstance.
That's
so
true.
The economy could be failing. I heard you talk about this in your intro. It's the stories we tell, right? So the facts are facts. Circumstances are circumstances. If the economy is failing and things are going wrong all around us, we can't control the circumstances, but we can control our experience within the circumstances by realizing that our thoughts and the meaning we attach to everything that's happening is all optional. So this is very heavy Viktor Frankl, but it's so incredible and empowering to understand that the stories we tell are what creates our thoughts, actions, results, and ultimately the experience that we have in our life.
Bing. And what's the last one?
And the last one is that our partner their only job is to be 100% themselves. Not to make us happy, not to fill our cup, not to do stuff for us. Our partner's only job is to be 100% themselves.
Awesome.
And let me tell you a little secret about that. Self, experience, and expectations, that spells sex. So the main idea of each of those laws spells sex, which is the highest expression of human connection.
Awesome.
There you have it in a nutshell.
So are you, and this is the last one, are you taking clients virtually or are you having workshops? What offerings do you have outside of the podcast to connect with individuals and couples?
Absolutely all of it. I have my coaching programs. Eventually, I'll put the connections into a course that will be the prerequisite to the complete intimacy coaching program because that's a little more hands-on. I do workshops. I have a free webinar that you can go to. Basically, all of my marriage resources that range from free, like the podcast and my webinar, to paid, like my workshops and my coaching programs, can all be found on the website. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready for it.
www.onthebrightersideofmarriage.com.
Oh, snap.
So the podcast is on the brighter side of life. You're right. And then my marriage resources are on the brighter side of marriage. And I also own the domain name On the Brighter Side of Health, where I have a lot of just physical, mental, and emotional health resources as well.
Well, awesome. I want to thank you so much, Monica, for being on the Billionaire Lifestyle Podcast.
Well, I appreciate all your hard work and your help with the sound. I think that's going to help me forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we said, remember, you are a billionaire. No, I'm not talking about money, because that's the first thing that we go to, which is a very new construct. It is a very, very new construct in the history of us being human beings. You are a billionaire human being. So I'm going to break those two things down. When your mother and father got together, they shared some DNA information with each other. The cosmos blessed that union. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, 8 became 16, on for 30 days. At the 30-day mark, you over 1 billion cells, and you hadn't touched the planet. So you are a billionaire. So I'm going to tell you about the human being part. We are HUE, people under the sun, because the sun illuminates us and gives us our color. Hue, in the image of man, and we are having an experience. That's the being part. You are in control of that, how you perceive it. When you get out the shower, here's what I need you to do. Drop your towel and all your nudity, your nakedness, and I need you to appreciate the God body that you were endowed with. It is just a vessel, because we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. When you meet another being that's having a physical experience, treat them with love, honor, and respect. Till next time, I love you all. Peace.